So I'm Helen Gleeson. I'm the head of School of Physics and Astronomy. I'm also an experimental physicist and so do research in experimental physics. So we all rely on using other people's information to set a context for our research, to inform it, and maybe to compare our results against. And of course the ease with which we can get hold of that data is critical to how well we can do that. So there are a number of facets to why open access is important. The first one is that it means that I can access other people's data, papers, information. But then more importantly, there's little point in me doing research if other people actually can't then find it themselves. And this is especially the case for institutions which might be in developing countries who might not have access to the sorts of library facilities that we have access to here. Industry certainly don't have access to the same sort of library things. And so actually for visibility of my research, it's really important that it is actually available to people who might want to read it. I think I've just described quite a few of the benefits of open access. The fact that it can make my research more visible to users. It absolutely is the case that people contact me and the research group that I work in and indeed the university because they hear about the research that's going on and they actually may want to collaborate, they may come up with new ideas, and so actually having that very open approach to sharing our outputs, our knowledge, our research can give lots of new benefits. If it's only me looking for collaborators and not other people looking in the other direction, then we're going to be quite constrained. So that's been really good. At first it appears that it's going to be quite difficult doing these things, but I think the process that's been put in place is very straightforward. I certainly didn't have any trouble finding my way around it, and if I did, the help that was available by following the links was both rapid and effective. So yeah, I found it as good support. Yes, I have indeed used Symplectic. Again, it's pretty straightforward to use. I mean, there are some irritating aspects of it, but they're not very irritating. I think that, they're only irritating in the same context as having to fill out any form is a little bit annoying. Okay, so it's actually quite variable. I'm an experimental physicist. Some of my data are in the form of images, and so they can be really quite big, and they could be photographic or they could be images that detectors at international synchrotrons, for example, take, and so they can be quite big data files. I also take data on smaller pieces of kit, so these might be in the form of graphs or data sets in terms of bespoke data formats. So if we've bought apparatus, that can often be bespoke, or we might just take data that's the standard sort of data that you'd take in any experiment where you've got a variable, you've got a parameter that you've measured, and you've got a data set that reports those related things together. So it's not something that so that's a good question, and in a way it's a difficult one to answer. So occasionally, yes, I have. I've shared it with theoreticians, and very often they're interested in having the raw data so that they can do particular fits to it, and there's no problem doing that because it's usually the final analysed data that they're after. And so that would be the format that I would normally be sharing data in. I wouldn't normally share the raw data because an awful lot of analysis steps are needed in order for us to make that actually meaningful in the context of the paper we've written. So there are again two facets to this. I think that when I'm collaborating with a theoretician and they need a particular data set, or indeed with other experimentalists on the team who might be analysing the data in a different way. That can also happen for international teams. Then there's no problem. We just discuss with each other what data's needed and then we share it. So that's really very straightforward. I think the complication comes with the current requirement to actually share the data that's behind a publication. And then there's a really difficult decision to be made, because of course you could go right down to the very basics, and sometimes it's meaningless to share data that's in that way. And I can give a couple of examples of that. So it isn't particularly helpful if we share data that's in a format where a bespoke piece of software is needed to actually analyse it. And so is there really any sense in uploading that? I don't think there is, personally. But I would be willing, obviously, to then share the data if a person needed it and wanted to access it. So that's one kind of data where I think that I probably wouldn't share it. I'm happy usually to share images. I'm reluctant to share data that we might analyse to get a different set of conclusions out. Now that doesn't mean we analysed it wrongly in the first instance, it's just that any one data set might have multiple uses. And because we've worked very hard to get that data, what I'm reluctant to do is to allow other people the opportunity to analyse that in a way that we might want to do but just haven't had time to do so before we've had the chance to do that. And so in circumstances like that, I probably wouldn't share the raw data. But I would share the data as deep as I could for it to be meaningful for someone else to look at it. Collaborations, allowing other people to have a more detailed look at the results that we've got. That can allow better interpretation, for example. So that's something that's very easy and very straightforward. And again, there's actually the thing that's nice about that is that you know who you're working with, and so if they've misinterpreted in some way what you've actually done, and this is an easy thing to happen because the whole process is very complex, then you've got that dialogue already going, and so it's easy for us to make sure that doesn't happen. And we can explain the context of the experiment where we actually took the data. So in the context of data that's been uploaded onto the repository so that it supports one of the papers we've published, of course I have shared that data by definition, but it's very difficult for me to know whether anyone's taken advantage of me sharing that data, and so in that context I've got no further information of whether that was useful, important, or otherwise. It's a bit of a one-way process.